Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning I bid to everyone. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala ahli baitihi wa azwajihi wa ashabihi wa man wala. Alhamdulillah, we are grateful to Allah for His blessings and grace that we are allowed to be here today in a ceremony of knowledge, where the Holy Prophet of Islam described it as a gathering beloved to God, His angels, and everything inside the heavens and the earth. We have already entered Rabiul Awal, which is a holy month where the Prophet is born and he also died in this month. So let us not forget to send prayers and blessings upon him. And we are grateful also as the Center for Advanced Irfan Studies Malaysia, Tradisi, is able to invite beloved Professor Cyrus Ali Zargar as the speaker for today's topic, which is Sufi Aesthetics, Beauty, Love, and the Human Form in the writings of Ibn Arabi and Iraqi, which is both an influential Sufi in the Islamic tradition. For your information, Tradisi is a center established dedicated to the study of Irfan as a substantive and essential part of the Islamic tradition. Special lecture today is actually a series of events that we have conducted since April, where we invited various experts on Islamic philosophy, Islamic mysticism, and Islamic theology. Today actually marks the sixth event in the series. Before I invite our speaker to give his lecture, I would like to remind everyone to switch off your microphone throughout the lecture session. The audience will be given chances to interact with the speaker after his lecture, where you are allowed to ask him questions or even discuss with him certain issues related to the topic. Therefore, without further ado, I would like to invite our beloved Professor Cyrus Ali Zargar to give his lecture. You are warmly welcome, Cyrus. تفضل مشكورا.
Thank you very much. So I'm timing this so that I don't go over time. I will keep it at 30 minutes, inshallah. So the goal then is to leave plenty of time for your questions. So I've timed myself and I've already used 30 seconds explaining that. So I've got 29 minutes and 30 seconds left. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, can you enable screen sharing for me, please?
Yes, no problem. I will. I will make you the co-host. Okay, I have already made you the co-host and you can share your screen, inshallah.
How about now? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, perfect. So perception and aesthetics in the thought of Ibn Arabi, reality within the boundaries of poetry. Let me start then with a poem that I think kind of encapsulates the issue that I want to talk about today. And that issue is the perception of beauty and the appreciation of beauty in Sufi thought, but especially in the thought of Ibn Arabi and some other Sufi figures who lived close to his time that will come up in the course of our conversation today. So this poem is one of 61 nasibs that are in the Tarjuman al-Ashwaq, the translator of desires. It's a well-known collection of poems by Ibn Arabi. And at the time of his life, it created controversy.
Recording in progress.
All right. Okay.
So we are sorry for the distraction.
That's okay.
We are sorry for
the
distraction. Okay.
No worries. You can see my screen still, right?
Yes.
Everything good? Okay, good. Okay, so during the time of his life, this poem created some controversy. Why controversy? Well, if you were to read the poems on their own, and I'd like for you to do that sometime, I think, if you haven't, without commentary, they do read as very straightforward, erotic love poetry. And so the accusation was that the Sheikh, that Ibn Arabi had written love poetry, with the kind of the pretext of that there's some human divine significance behind them. And there was actually, it was a very serious accusation, and there was a trial. It was considered. And one thing that Ibn al-Arabi did in response was write a commentary on his own poetry called the 𝗦𝗂𝗰𝗁𝗁, the treasuries of precious things, of precious things would be a good translation. And in this, he comments on his own poetry, which, if you think about it, is very valuable. Because now we have Ibn al-Arabi's poetry, and we have Ibn al-Arabi's interpretation of his own poetry. So we start to see him theorizing about poetry, and he does that elsewhere as well. But you can read the commentary as a sort of way to read poetry, as a guideline for reading poetry. And while many would call that a hermeneutic, I'm saying the focus is aesthetic. And the reason I'm saying the focus is aesthetic, I'll spoil the surprise now, is that it's a way of describing a manner of perception. It describes a manner of perception, a way of seeing the world and appreciating beauty, an altered way of perceiving things. So let me read the poem. This is a translation. My translation from the book that is the title of our topic today. Peace be upon Salma and whoever settles in that private pasture. And it is the duty of one like me, so tender-hearted, to give greetings. And what would she lose if she were to return these salutations to us? But one cannot pass judgment against beautiful idols. They set off when the tenebrousness of night let down its curtains. And I said to her, uncontrollably in love, stranded, enslaved by love, yearning surrounding him jealously, ready to unleash upon him our racing arrows no matter where he turns. She smiled, revealing her teeth. A flash of lightning struck. I do not know which of the two broke the sheer night darkness. She said, doesn't it suffice him concerning me that with his heart he witnesses me in every single moment? Doesn't it? Doesn't it? Okay, so we'll break down this poem, and I think you'll begin to see what I'm talking about here when I'm saying there's something going on about perception. So first, let's look at the relationship. The relationship is between a man and a woman, but there's a reversal. Usually in Ibn Arabi's cosmology and in his writings, the male represents dominance, power, and the female receptivity. And this works throughout the universe. Now, in the poem, the male, the lover, Ibn Arabi, is weak, needy, vulnerable. And the female is not just elusive, beyond that, cruel, powerful. This is, by the way, what I'm saying right now is from Ibn Arabi's own commentary. I'm not just making this up. This is what he says about the poem. These are the points of significance to him. So, first of all, that kind of division, right, points to a tension in the divine names themselves. In the divine names, we know there's you could call it a kind of power, and on the other side, there's a kind of beauty. On one side, there's a kind of hardness, and another kind of side, a kind of softness. And that tension, by the way, in the same way that the tension between the names creates the universe and brings about the universe, you're seeing the tension bring about this drama, this poem. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're seeing, but we're seeing more than that. The key to the poem, as far as I'm concerned, lies in the end. So first of all, he loves her, and he tells her, I'm suffering uncontrollably in love. I feel stranded. And you notice he doesn't say I. I'm saying I. I'm interpreting it. He doesn't say I. He's suffering, and he won't say I. Why? Because look at his humility, right? Uncontrollably in love. And he speaks about himself in the third person because he's so insignificant. He feels so insignificant, stranded, enslaved by loves, yearning surrounding him, right? He's asking for help. What's her response? She smiles. It is perhaps the cruelest response. It would probably be the cruelest response to his lament, except that I think actually the concluding two lines, the bait that concludes the at the end, that's the cruelest response. The cruelest response is yet to come. So she smiles. And the smile is a moment of revelation, because you have this flash of lightning at the same time. There's something going on here, but let's leave that. Let's come back to that. So what does she say? She says, isn't it enough that he's thinking about me all the time? I'm always there because you're always thinking about me, aren't you? Isn't that enough? Isn't it? Right? Doesn't that suffice? Well, that's a very ironic response, because in fact, that is the very premise of his pain. That is the very reason that he suffers, is the fact that he cannot be with her, and yet he sees her everywhere. And yet, if you think about the dilemma of the Arif, if you think about the dilemma of the knower of God, what is that dilemma? It is precisely this. God cannot be had. What is in the Quran? What does God say to Moses? You will not see me. Well, how about this? Look at the mountain. Comes crumbling down. So there is something unattainable about God, and yet the desire for seeing him is always there. Okay. Now, these are certainly wonderful in terms of themes, and I think you're starting to see the spiritual significance of the poem. But what you're not seeing yet is what I was talking about, this perceptive experience, because there's more to the poem than this. The key problem that we have is why does this situation, the situation of the poem, describe so well the situation of the knower and seeker of God? Are the two alike in some way that's symbolic? What I mean is, Ibn Arabi and Nizam is his beloved. Okay, he says that in the introduction. She's a real woman, by the way, as far as I can tell. He talks about her lineage, he talks about her father, he's talking about a real woman. The beloved and Ibn Arabi, this love between them, this desire, this sense of yearning, is this simply symbolic when it comes to the relationship that a knower of God has to God? Or is there something more there? Well, my argument, and it's an argument I make throughout an entire book, is that there's something more there. That you couldn't say that this kind of love is a symbol for that kind of love. This kind of love represents that kind of love. No, that's not accurate. An apt metaphor would be that this kind of love is, well, we might say like a drop of water. A very small drop of water. And the real kind of love is the ocean. The drop of water originates from the ocean, and the drop of water goes back to the ocean. It's really a small, minuscule representation of the reality that is that ocean. That is to say, what any lover put in this position could feel, what any lover who's deeply loved with all of his or her heart has felt for another person: self-loss, bewilderment, weakness, being consumed. That is the reality of love. And that reality of love, it is actually the experience of witnessing, of knowing the divine. Okay, more coming on that. Let me give you a little bit of background. Let's see how much time I have. Okay. So I keep talking about this book, but the reason is not to sort of, I'm not trying to advertise it at this point. It's a very old book. It's from 2011. So, if you can't find it, let me know. I'll help you, find it. But the reason I say that is because I only have 18 minutes left, and there's a whole book worth of things to say. And if you'd like to get more of the argument that I'm making today, you can read the book. Now, in the book, I focus on two figures, Ibn Arabi and Iraqi. Iraqi, despite his name might sound like he's from Iraq, but he's from Iraq. He's from the western part of Iran. Iraq Ajam, it's called. So Hamadan, that region. So he's a Persian poet. And the reason I chose these two figures is that, as you saw with Ibn Arabi, he's a poet and he's a commentator on poetry. So we have his artistic output, but we also have kind of a meta level analysis of that artistic output. So too with Iraqi. With Iraqi, we have the poetry, but we have prose, we have a writing in prose where he writes about beauty and love in a way that we can use to read his poetry. So I wanted to create a situation where I could learn how to read the poetry the way they would. And I came to the conclusion that there was one phenomenon above and beyond all other things that is the crux of Sufi poetry. And that is something called shuhud, called mushahada, but shuhud is the term I'll use, witnessing the divine, witnessing God's beauty, very often in the forms of things that exist around you in your own senses. And sometimes witnessing the divine even in the face of another human being. Okay. Iraqi writing in Persian, Ibn Arabi writing in Arabic. It was nice to have that because there's an important transition that will happen after Ibn Arabi into the Persianate world, and they'll take that flag and really run with it. And then you get Hafez, someone like Hafez a few centuries later. And Hafez epitomizes this tension, right? If you read a poem of Hafez, it's so confusing. In fact, it's created, probably tens of thousands of pages of debate about whether Hafez meant a human beloved or the divine beloved, right? There's a sense of confusion there. Also, there's another connection between them. So Iraqi comes from the school of Persian Sufism. You can trace, his teaching back to Ahmed Ghazali. He spent time with the Chishtiya, proto-Chishti Sufis in India, but then he became connected with and affiliated with the school of Ibn Arabi by spending time with Qunawi in Kunya. So there's a connection there. Okay, enough about the book. Let's get to, unless I need to stop for some reason, let's get to, interrupt me if there's any reason to stop, you can let me know. Let's get to this idea of perception. There's a bit of background here that I'll go over quickly. Going over it quickly is good and bad. Good because we don't have time. Bad because it's the kind of thing that takes time. So I'm going to give you a short version. Let's see what we can do with it for now. So for this, I'm going back to Ibn Sina, the philosopher. Ibn Sina inherits a discourse about the human, we could call it human perception, human psychology, from other philosophers before him. And they some of that comes from Galen, but before that, a lot of it comes from Aristotle. But Ibn Sina was a very original thinker. And he wasn't the type of person to just take something and adopt it. He would change it, modify it, make it his own. This is, in fact, what makes him such a genius. One of the important changes that he's going to make to pre-modern psychology is that in pre-modern psychology, there was one way of seeing the imagination. But Ibn Sina starts to see the imagination in a split way. What do I mean by that? He starts to differentiate between the way the human perception deals with forms and something beyond form. And that distinction is new, as far as I can tell and as far as I've read. It's new to him to talk about something beyond perceiving forms, that there's something where you perceive forms and create forms in the imagination, in the mind. You create forms and receive meanings. Now it's for us to get into what he meant by meaning would take a while. The Sufis take this idea and run with it, and what they mean by meaning very often is different from what Ibn Sina meant by meaning. But what he meant by meaning seems to just be some level of significance beyond form It could be the intentions of a thing. And in fact, that's the way the Latins translated intentio. They translated as, I mean, we get our, that's, we use the word intention now from that. But the example that he uses might help. So these faculties, by the way, they don't just exist for human beings. Animals have them in a lower way as well. And animals imagine, and animals also perceive something that's beyond the forms of things. So he says, when a sheep sees a wolf, well, the sheep sees the form of the wolf. Imagine for the first time the sheep sees the wolf. The sheep sees the form of the wolf, but the sheep doesn't just see the form of the wolf. The sheep sees aggression. The sheep sees hostility. The sheep sees danger. And this is the meaning that's beyond. And then this becomes recorded in the mind of the sheep. Both of them do, the form and the meaning. And so the way humans think, we can use these forms to create other kinds of forms, and we store those meanings too, and we do things with those as well. Why that matters for Sufism is the reason why that matters for Sufism is that this dichotomy between form and meaning becomes the perfect opportunity to talk about a way of perceiving the world that acknowledges what you see, gives importance to what you see, but says that there's something more to it, that it's conveying something to you. So this is not from Ibn Arabi, this is from Rumi, it's from the Masnavi. Just a translation from the Masnavi. What is the appeal? Multicolored words like lines drawn on water, not lingering. Think of this speech as appeal, meaning, ma'na as the pith. This speech as a drawing, meaning as the soul. Okay, there's a lot going on here, but let me break it down for you simply. So we have a walnut, or really anything else, any kind of fruit or nut. It has a peel. Does the peel matter? Is the outside shell important? Yes. Well, it wouldn't exist without that. Okay, but if you stop there, you're getting nowhere. For your health or for whatever reason, the heart of that thing is inside. It's beyond it. So too, in a perception of things, there are some people who stick with the forms of things. They see the world, the external forms of things, and imagine that to be all there is. But the proper way of perceiving is to know that beyond the forms of things, these forms are conveying meaning, spiritual realities. So in Sufi language, very often ma'na is really, you could translate it just the spirit. Ma'na is from the domain of the arwah, from the domain of spirits. It's a way of conveying that. And why that matters for art and why that matters for aesthetics, if not obvious yet, is that good art should have a form. He says, think of the speech as appeal. Meaning is what's in the speech. Can someone have meaningless speech? Definitely. Can someone have meaningless art? Yes. And actually, you'll see this in Sufi writings about art. So I've been tracing them. I haven't written it up yet, but Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, Imam Ghazali, Ibn Arabi, and Rumi, these three figures speak disparagingly about drawings, not the visual arts in general, because calligraphy conveys meaning, but drawings. Why? Because it's all form and no meaning. What's the opposite of that? Something, or not the opposite, but what is a form of art that has form and meaning? Poetry. Words are the forms, but you can't have meaningless poetry. It doesn't make any sense. You could, but it wouldn't be, for them, it wouldn't be poetry. It has to convey something. It has to convey these deeper spiritual realities. Now, the human form is the ultimate form. And as the ultimate form, it can convey the ultimate meaning. There is no better conduit, no better expression for the beauty of God than this perfection of form, which is human beauty. Okay, so then that's how you get to see that human love matters in this really important way. human love too is a conduit, a bridge by which you achieve love for the divine. There were people such as Attar who basically said, you can't really become a lover of God until you've fallen in love at least once in your life with another human being. How? You wouldn't really understand how it worked, right? So there's more to it than this too. So in these 7 minutes that remain, I'll delve a little more into the difficulties of it. So
Cyrus, it's
yes,
okay if you drag some time, no problem. We have all the time,
no, it's okay.
inshallah. Yeah.
I'm sure in the question and answer, whatever I don't talk about now, I'll get to the question and answer. It'll be even better. That's my feeling, because I'd rather hear, maybe there's, we'll go where you want to go. I might go a little over, but I won't go more than a minute or two, hopefully, inshallah. So, okay, there's a term in the literature on Sufism that goes back actually a long way, called the shahid. Shahid is like you know it as witness, I'm sure, a testimony. And in the older Sufi literature where it'll appear, the shahid is described as a remnant in the heart from your dhikr. So as a person does dhikr, what remains in their heart is a kind of testimony to that dhikr. It creates something in the heart that's a testimony to God from the dhikr. That's the older version. In Ibn Arabi's version of the shahid, it's a little more involved and theoretical. In Ibn Arabi's version, yes, dhikr is important, but something happens, an unveiling. And that unveiling leaves a stamp on the heart. Okay? Because remember, spiritual realities, we can receive them, but we can't perceive them. Okay? We can receive them, but there is nothing for us to process them by in our human understanding. So if you're getting some kind of unveiling, something where it's just like this massive, shock of spirituality to your system, you don't have anything to process it by. But what you do have is this mark, this shahid in the heart. And then what you begin to do throughout your life is that you begin to look back at that shahid almost like a pair of glasses, like a prism, like a lens. And looking through it, or you see it in places, and it gives you delight. It gives you joy. And it gives you a sense that you're witnessing God in these things. Okay? You're seeing divine attributes, divine names all throughout. And by the way, I'm not talking about, when I'm talking about seeing, I'm talking literally about seeing. I'm talking about someone looking at a spot on their prayer rug, looking out into nature, looking at a face, and seeing in that person the remnants of what was in their heart from an unveiling that God gave them outside the boundaries of matter. Now, this is not exclusive to Ibn Arabi. What Ibn Arabi often does is give us really, really beautiful theoretical versions of ideas that existed in Sufism, in 𝗦𝗂𝗰𝗶, in the Sufi sciences before he's writing. So, for example, we see in 𝗦𝗂𝗬𝗏 al-Hamadani this poem. On account of that idol shahid, the soul lost its life. The heart, in seeking union with him, became irremediable. He, unprovoked, hid himself from us. Disbelief and Islam became to us alike. On account of that idol shahid. Why is the shahid an idol? Why is the shahid an idol? Now, the shahid might be a person, but the shahid isn't the person. The person is the spot of the shahid. It's the place where a person witnesses something that's in their own heart. Why is an idol? What is an idol? An idol is a representation of God, right? So this is something that's representing the divine beauty and the divine names. The soul lost its life. Why does the soul lose its life? Because when you're in love with something, you're willing to give everything for it. And you want to give everything for it. The heart, in seeking union with him, became irremediable. Why is the heart? Because there is no cure, Remember the poem that we started at the beginning of our talk with? There's no cure for this pain. Actually, it only gets worse. So the heart keeps seeking union, but remember, the heart is not seeing the thing. It's seeing a representation, a memory of the thing. You can't see the thing because the thing is the real. So there's a constant seeking, but there's a constant not getting. Okay. He unprovoked hid himself from us. This is God ignoring us, turning away, but it's not actually that. That's how we perceive it, right? It's our own failure as well, our own lack of capacity. Disbelief and Islam became to us alike. Why? If you were to tell someone that that God is here and there and that the Shahid is God, that's heresy. But actually, it's the reality of Islam itself. It's Islam on a visionary level. So Islam and this kind of disbelief, they're one thing. I'll staying true to my promise, I'll end on this. I'll do two slides real quick. This slide, all this slide tells us is, I'll read the poem. This is also from Rumi. I use the Persian poetry because just it's a nice kind of, pithy way of getting these ideas across. Pass by the goblets of form. Do not stop there. Yes, the wine is in the cup, but it is not of the cup. What does that mean? You have wine in a cup, right? Why is the wine is the valuable thing? It's what the person seeks, the wine drinker. Well, are the wine and the cups really bound together in some realistic way? No, the cup is a medium. Could have been in a jug or a bottle, right? It happens to be in a cup. Don't get caught up in the form. Don't get caught up in the medium that conveys the spirit. We humans have a tendency to do that because our way of perceiving is primarily sensory. We start off in this world gathering knowledge through our senses. And because of that, we see deep, deep and incredible value in what is sensory. We see what is sensory as being what's real. Okay. When spiritual matters occur to us, the only way we can really begin to understand them, as I've said before, is through sensory information, right? The meeting place of those two for Ibn Arabi is imagination. Imagination is where spirit takes on form. Okay. Now, I don't have the time to get into the details, but poetry is one fine example of that. Dreaming is one fine example of that. Think about when you dream. Think about what happens. When a person dreams, if it's a meaningless dream, it's just form. You're just seeing random forms that the imagination has created. Oh, you just a mess of forms from you throughout your day. But if it's a meaningful dream, what do you see? A person who has a meaningful dream could be, imagine they have a dream of the wind, or I always use this example, cats. A bunch of cats are grabbing onto their arms, just pulling off these cats. Are you seeing cats? Are you seeing the wind? No, you're seeing stress. You're seeing anxiety. Anxiety has taken a form, right? You see fire, you see blood, you see tears. These things all, there's some supersensory reality that to you doesn't have a form. And the Sufis know from their learning from the Quran itself that there's a day when things that have no form take a form. Someone will see, whoever did an atom's weight of good will see it. Whoever did an atom's weight of evil will see it. You're going to see forms, the forms of good and evil. Representational realities are the order of the day in the afterlife. But in this world, it takes an arif to be able to make those connections very often, a knower of God. And in fact, we have access to it. Everyone has access to it in dreams, but the arif, the knower of God, can see it while it's awake. And the poet can create that. The poet can create that scenario, can create something that induces this through poetry. The real poet, the true poet, can create forms in the forms of words that convey the supersensory meaning. And that's the magic of poetry. And that's why it's the highest art. So I end with this last slide, not this one. This is too long. This one. Based on what I said, This is why Ibn Arabi says the knowers of God, the recognizers of God, you could say, on the other hand, do not hear a poem or a riddle or a panegyric or a love lyric without knowing who is in it behind the veil of forms. Meaning that a knower could very well read the sonnets of Shakespeare, which were not written by someone, as far as we know, who had some deep relationship with God and is writing about God, or they could read the love poetry or a love song even right now on the radio. They could see that and understand that the reality of the love that that person's going through is beyond even what they understood. The poet can write something deeper than what they can appreciate. The arif will then come in and appreciate and understand that behind the veil, there is no beloved but God. If a person loves something, they love perfection, and all perfection is with God. If the person is in love with someone, what are they in love with? Their beauty, their intelligence, their kindness. All of these things are divine attributes. So I end with this, and I open it up, staying true to my promise that I'll keep it short, to questions and answers. Questions, and then I'll do my best to answer, but I mean, conversation. I'd love to learn from you all as well.
Jazakallahu khairan kathira. Thank you very much, Cyrus, for your beautiful lecture just now. So we will be giving the opportunity to audience to interact with our speaker today. If you want to directly interact with him, you can open your mic and just talk with him. Or if you write down your questions in the comment section, I will read it out to him, inshallah.
Assalamualaikum. I don't have a question, but I have a comment actually. Cyrus Saab, I actually just finished reading your book, The Polished Mirror, and I wanted to just express my appreciation for all the hard work and effort you put in for that book. I found it such a brilliant and lucid, summary of so many different thinkers, and it just made me I was able to understand like what they're actually talking about and what the essence of what they're saying is, vis-a-vis virtue ethics. And it was very lucid and very helpful for me. So may Allah bless you for all the effort that you put in for that.
That's really kind of you. And there's nothing more than an author wants to hear than that. Thank you, really. You made my day. I appreciate that.
Alhamdulillah, it is a very good comment just now. So audiences, we are still waiting. We still open the opportunity to interact with him. Cyrus, while waiting for the other question, I actually have two questions regarding your lecture just now.
Sure.
Firstly, about poetry. I myself is actually a poet. I write poems, sometimes love poems, sometimes sophistic poems. And I really wanted to know what is the distinguishing factor or the differentiating factor between an Islamic poetry and a non-Islamic poetry.
That's a great question.
And
Beautiful
the second question that I would like to ask is regarding the types of love in Ibn Arabi's philosophy. Does he distinguish between godly love or humanly love, or does he sees that there is only one love, or what is the type of love in Ibn Arabi's thinking actually?
Okay, I'm going to get into your first question. If I forget your second one, you might have to restate it, because
Yes.
Your first one was such a good question that I might go so deep into it that I lose my way and have a hard time getting back. Okay, so
no problem.
So, it's a really good question. Actually, that question is the heart of this whole of this issue that I'm dealing with. So Ibn Arabi, to me, has probably the smartest analysis of this. So if we're talking about love poetry, there is effectively no such thing as Islamic poetry that should be very different from any other kind of poetry, because the poet would be, if true, would be expressing the experience of love so truly that they would accidentally say the same thing as an Arif. They would say the same thing because they've experienced, you see, so the only kind of poetry that would be non-Islamic would be bad poetry. And what's amazing is that in the Futuhat al-Makkiyah, Ibn Arabi gives us a case of bad poetry. And he tells us why it's bad. He tells us, he shows you that this person, they're not really sincere in their love. I don't have it on memorized. I can't see on the top of my head, but he takes it line by line and says, look, this person, for example, here says, emphasizes the smell of the beloved more than the beloved herself, things like this, you know, and says, look, this is bad poetry, right? On the other hand, you'll see Ibn Arabi praise the pre-Islamic Jahili poets as being true representatives of, he says, that's my religion. My religion is that. I follow theirs. Right? I follow the religion of love. That's it. In his famous line, by the way, you know, the famous lines of poetry of Ibn Arabi that are cited, so that, you know, I follow the, you know, it's, what is it? Could be the temple, the synagogue, you know, I follow the deen of love, the religion of love. If you read the whole thing, you see that the religion of love he's talking about is the religion of poets, of love poets. So in that sense, I would say, look, anything that is true, a true love poem, it would be the most Islamic kind of poetry. But then remember that our category of poetry includes just what we call verse. And so there is a kind of poetry, Ibn Arabi writes it, Rumi writes it, others write it, that is instructional. It's basically sermons or theories from Islam, from the Islamic sciences, that are put into verse. Now, in this case, there's a clearly Islamic dimension. You read the Masnavi, I mean, not a person who's not Muslim would, I wouldn't even see why they would have much interest in this text as a whole. I mean, there are parts of it would certainly be interesting, but there's parts of the Masnavi where he's doing tafsir. There's parts of the Masnavi where he's basically parsing out a theological problem, you know, like, you know, Ash'ari versus Mu'tazili. He's like thinking about, you know, there's parts of it where he's dealing with even issues from Sharia, right? So, you know, Islamic poetry can be a lot of things, and if it is the kind that's teaching, then of course it'll look different. But love poetry is, I would say, its own category. Okay, now your second question was about, see, I knew I'd forget. Could you repeat it?
Yes, it's about the type of love in Ibn Arabi's thinking. Does he has differentiate between there is godly love, there is humanly love, or he says only there is only one love?
No, there are different types of love, but the reality of love is one. So because there are people who can love unaware, you see, that's the problem. There are people who love a human beloved for their own sake, unaware that the reality of their love is God. And by the way, I mean, we're a group of adults, so I can tell you that's even how one should consummate their love for Ibn Arabi, is with that kind of awareness. But that's not everyone. And so there are types of love because there are types of awareness. So there are some, Ibn Arabi tells us, they love in an animal way, right? And there are some they love in the real way, as an arif. So that it's your ability to perceive who the real beloved is that dictates that level of love. That's a great question too.
Yeah, thank you so much for
pleasure.
answering to my questions. I see here Nur Alam raising his hand. Please, if you have any questions or if you want to discuss, go on.
Thank you, Cyrus. Such a beautiful presentation and such a beautiful insights you have explained or showed to us, and to read Ibn Arabi with such a deeper understanding. So, and also I appreciate the way you explain any human love, the meaning behind it, that when a human fall in love, what he falls in love with. He falls in love with the beauty. He falls in love with the love, the rahmah, the mercy, the tender feeling. And those are all godly qualities. As a result, this form, behind the form is God. So what actually that last line of Ibn Arabi poem you mentioned, that a smile is the response. And that I really loved it. But that a smile gave him mushahada, the shahid. Yeah, the one says she smiled, lightning flashed, and I couldn't tell what it was that split the night. Each moment he beholds me anew in his heart. She said, what more he can he ask? So that yushahiduni, that mushahada, that means he started seeing God everywhere. Is that what Ibn Arabi meaning?
I mean, on each particular case where he's using that verb, I wouldn't necessarily see it that way, but that's significant. That level of significance would be there. So the reason, just to go back, I mean, the reason why it's so bright is like her teeth are that white, right? So she's got these beautiful white teeth, and it's a shock of light. But generally, in Sufi poetry and in Sufi symbols, and not just Sufism, you see it in philosophy too. The lightning flash is a kind of direct inspiration, or a direct giving of knowledge, a kind of inspiration sort of thing. So that's how I took it. But then the concluding line says, "You shahidni." Yes, then he's talking about seeing God everywhere. After that,
Thank
yes.
you. Thank you. That's a beautiful way and to understand even Arabic. And I think the she, the that, which is the feminine, and that's what he means as Salma is that. Yeah, that she. This
It's
feminine.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's he talks about the feminine, masculine, feminine relationship. There's a feminine origin, which is not the same as the creative feminine, and then there's the masculine, and then there's the creative feminine. This is it from the Fas Muhammad in the Fusus al-Hikam. He talks about this. So it's a good way of looking
wonderful.
at it.
Yeah.
Well, we are still opening the room. We are still giving the opportunity for the audience to interact with our speaker. Please, if you have any. Yeah, we have here Patricia Benstein. Please go on.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. Can you hear me? I'll just put my headphones on. Okay.
Yeah.
Look, I really appreciate what you said, and I feel all the time that language is very limited. Even as you were talking about such a very important subject, I'm just describing really my personal reaction to it. I feel like my energy moves to my head, to my intellectual understanding of it all. And on some level, I find this extremely frustrating that I can't express in my own words this meeting point where we don't divide between form and essence anymore, where it actually does melt into one. We're always caught in this duality as we're trying to describe these phenomena. And then as I listen to different lectures, I find the same thing. Like I'm trying to find that meeting point in myself as Ibn Arabi expresses it. And then I automatically go back into my intellectual reasoning and understanding it from that perspective, even the love poetry. So the human language seems to be so extremely limited in bringing about this merging of seeing the form and recognizing the divine behind the form. And I don't know, I don't even know what my question is or whether you can say something about this. I just talk as it comes to me right now. My frustration is always there that as human beings, we tend to just automatically, and especially like academics, move into our head trying to understand the poetry from that analytical point of view and losing somehow exactly what he was trying to convey, which is that ultimately it is all one, and we can't distinguish between form and spirit or form and essence. We can't look at somebody and fall in love with them as a person without seeing the divine behind that. So I wonder if you can say something about this, the human language and its limitation in actually pinpointing exactly that point, which I can only relate to it in terms of the dreams that come, or artistic forms of expression. But as soon as there's language involved, there seems to be duality, and quite often the move into the head rather than speaking from the heart. So that is my personal frustration, and I don't know if you can say something about that. Because I find language is such a limitation, and maybe silence is the only non-limiting force, but I find that really difficult.
I can only just say that the problem that you've pinpointed is very commonly spoken about in these texts that I'm reading as well. I mean, once you talk about it, it's gone.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, Rumi's poetry, for example, silence, khamush, it's one of his, he uses it as a pen name, and he'll very often end his poem saying, we just have to stop talking. Khamush, there's nothing to say, right? Let's just be quiet. Let's just have silence, because what are you going to do, right? Or, but that frustration, there's a story that it just came to my mind based on what you were saying, where Ahmed Ghazali he had a rose in one hand and he's looking at a beautiful face on the other, and he just keeps going back and forth and back and forth, and his students come into the room and he keeps going back and forth, and they need to talk to him, but he's ignoring them and looking at the rose, the beautiful face, and they say, excuse me, sir, are we bothering you by being here? And he said, yes. And it's a great story because his preoccupation, as you can see, he's preoccupied, and it's beyond kind of social discourse. It's beyond this. But then if you notice the other thing, why does he keep going back and forth? Because neither form can really capture the beauty that he's after. This is why he goes back and forth and back and forth. The beauty that you seek is beyond these forms, as you say, So no, it's a great observation that you make.
Thank you. Yeah, this melting point and the limitation of it is currently my obsession. Yes.
It's a good obsession.
We're still waiting for other questions, inshallah, or other interaction with our beloved speaker today. Please do ask him or interact with him. We open the floor to the audiences, inshallah.
I had a question, if I could proffer it. Cyrus, in your book, The Polished Mirror, you sort of lament that you don't have the space to talk about the political implications of virtue ethics. And you say that, I have to just talk about the individual level. I'm really interested, I'm about to start a PhD project, and I'm really interested in the role of virtue ethics in Islam, philosophical and Sufi, on politics, on like how Muslims in a pre-modern, pre-colonial context, thought about Islam and Sharia and the law and how far it should go and what it means to have a, Medina Fadila. My question might be too big, but on one hand, you have these intellectual and idealistic articulations of, what it means to have a ideal society, an ideal city. And on the other hand, you have the sort of nitty-gritty of governance. What is the connection between the two? Can we see a connection? So, for example, 𝗦𝗂𝗰𝗁𝗁 says that modern Islamism is coercive. It's inherently coercive, but pre-modern Muslims, you don't see these consistently coercive outcomes in the name of religion. And it seems to me that the difference between modern Islamism and pre-modern Muslim political thought is the presence of this virtue ethics in the intellectual ecosphere and system. And yeah, maybe it's too big, I apologize, but is there an effect? Do we actually see that? Or is pre-modern political Islam or pre-modern Islamic politics just less coercive because there's just less capacity for the state to interfere? Where does, yeah.
It's a brilliant question. No, it's a great question. I'll give a short answer to this only because, others here haven't read the book. So I want to make sure that everybody's kind of at the same place, but it's a really great question. My short answer would be that traditionally in the past, societies, they had an elite, right? And the elite represented that specific part of the world, that specific culture, you were a good fill in the blank, right? You were a good Arab. You were a good, let's say Englishman or whatever. You were a good, and there was a kind of localized sense. And then virtue ethics helped you be the best version of that you could be, right? So it created this. And so a lot of what we're seeing when we're reading traditional Islamic texts on the virtues is how to be a good, courtly, noble, Persian, Arab, Muslim, person in this society, right? And that's the part that today, in the contemporary world, people are much less interested in. There's a sense of sameness, but where virtue ethics, I think, does help is there's a sense where virtue ethics can allow for variety and diversity that other kinds of ethics can't. And so if you're talking about the state and you're talking about politics, that view of the self and that view of ethics and how to be, it allows people to flourish in their own way. It allows people to instead of having these kind of universal standards, it allows them to focus on being some version of themselves. And I would say, we could extend it and say that it would allow people to say, look, this is my role in society, and I can be the best version of that possible. That's another topic. That's a topic that I'd want to deal with later. But because, others haven't, because our topic was the Sufi aesthetic kind of stuff. We don't want to get too much into it because, it'd be kind of excluding.
Yeah. Could I email you further on this?
Yeah, email me.
Okay.
I'll put it in the chat. I'll put my email in the chat. That's the best way. Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Sure. My pleasure. Okay.
We're still giving the chances, the opportunity for the audience to interact, inshallah. Well, I believe there are no other questions posed by the audience. So I believe that it is also a great opportunity if everyone continue to interact with Cyrus with his email that he has given out in the comment section. It would prove it will be a continuity lah. It will be a continuity to our session today. So before ending this session, I would like to thank Cyrus for his willingness and kindness to be with us today. And his lecture, I believe, has benefited everyone in the most significant way, including me, myself. And to everyone who joined today, thank you so much for supporting Tradisis event. And inshallah, this is not the last event that we will be holding on Islamic mysticism, Islamic philosophy, and also Islamic theology. Do support us by joining either events, inshallah. And we have the recording. We will put the recording in the YouTube, inshallah. Just find the name of this program, and then you can hear back the recording. But the recording will be ready later on after the event. And thank you so much, everyone. I would like to close this event with wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good day to everyone, inshallah.
Good day to you all. Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.